With this, we welcome you to this event as an extended family of nice Nepal.
Chair, please take over.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all the participants, also our speakers. First of all, I would like to say we're grateful to Dr. Pramod Jaswal and to Nepal Institute of Cooperation and Engagement to make this panel possible. So, and the second one, I just received a sad news from two of our participants. They're fighting with COVID now, and we will send to them best wishes to speedy recovery and to health. So, for Reliament, we will have 1 hour and a half time today, and for each participant, it will be 10 minutes to speak. And after all the participants speak, we will have questions and answer sessions. Please drop your questions if you have some questions to the chat box, and I will introduce them to all of us. So, because Mr. Tuheiava and Mr. Temaru is absent today, and Mr. Wamytan is too. I think he have some problems with connection. Please, I would like to introduce you, Mr. Inoke Finau, who will told us about Tonga, and their topic is a kingdom with a vast marine resource needing assistance to exploit it in a managed way. Please, Mr. Inoke, the stage is yours. You have 10 minutes. Please, let's start. Please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Okay, we hear you.
Thank you very much, and Malo Lele from Tonga. Thank you very much for the invitation for this meeting, and I'm honored to be part of the distinguished experts on their various fields in these sessions. I will start by telling you about my country, Tonga. It is in the South Pacific. It is surrounded by Fiji, Vanuatu, Niue, and various other small countries in the Pacific. It is a small island, archipelago, 290 square miles in area, but of course covers a lot of sea and marine area. It's about 700 square kilometers of sea that Tonga covers. Given the vast sea area, Tonga is rich in marine resources. It is, however, pretty small inland area. But the marine resources give us a lot of benefits, but also a lot of problems. As we can all know, the sea in the Pacific area has been a dumping grounds for rubbish. There are illegal fishing going on in the area, but also it becomes a war games area for bigger countries. These developments has given us a lot of problems. It affects our natural resources. And therefore, we must do something to reverse this kind of trends. The climate change has also affected our fishing grounds with diversions of a lot of fish migrating through Tonga into other routes. And the impact of that in our economy is that we find we spend a lot more money going out to find the fish. As mitigating factors, we think we should have regulations to safeguard ourselves. We should have exercise security for our fishing grounds. And of course, to keep the natural resources going into the future, we are adding on marine farming as a way forward. While regulations and security for fishing grounds can be resolved quickly, fish farmings, we think, needs additional assistances, technical and financial. But of course, they have a lot of promise for Tonga and also smaller countries in the Pacific. For example, we have the high price marine products like sea cucumber, and we can farm that in Tonga. Otherwise, we can overfish them now and then, and we need time for the sea cucumber to reproduce. So fish farming has got a lot of promise for ourselves. Tonga has got a small population, only 100,000. The next census will be taken this year, and the statistic department is predicting decreasing populations to 90,000 or something around there. However, we know that our population is growing very fast because in relative to a small land area. So the growing populations exploit the marine resources very quickly. Like I said, in the sea cucumber area, we have taken out a lot of sea cucumber that stays close to the shores, and that's have an impact on the supply that we have. We must have population control measures to ensure that we have managed and enough populations for the area we have. Agricultural production in the country is driven by the people needs and also the area that we have. And we need to manage that well. What we need there is actually a per acre use to increase. For example, for kumras, maybe the production is about 3 to 5 tons per acre. But it is possible to have 10 to 15 tons per acre. And that will be assisted by mechanizations and perhaps managed fertilizations. So in this area, the farming area, we need that. We also need to add value to the products that we produce here. Because if we don't add value, then our market base would be very small. For example, cassava, we send fresh produce to New Zealand or Australia, and the people that eat them and buy them are just Tongans or Pacific Islands people. The bigger market is the whole populations. And if we can produce marketable chips, cassava chips, and sell overseas, that will be assisting ourselves in improving our natural resources. We need, therefore, mechanizations, we need technology to develop added values, and we also need marketing informations and marketing penetrations for those produce. So in the agricultural area, we have the natural resources, but we need to keep them going, and we need to add value to these products. Energy in Tonga, it's a very expensive commodity, but it helps very much with our social needs, but particularly in our developmental needs. We are now moving into renewable energy, but of course these are expensive to build, and we are depending very much on donors to assist ourselves with those developments. But if we can do that, then we can lower the cost of our energy cost, particularly in the hotel and tourism industry sector. So we need these things. We are going through that process, and hopefully it will continue on. The other issue with regards to energy is that we have outdated, old models of appliances and vehicles. And of course, they consume a lot of energy. Tonga needs, of course, to move up to those new models, but of course, that needs resources in the hands of the people. The new world order, we understand that China is a major player in terms of the economic power of in the world. We also understand that other countries in the Asian area and in South America area are becoming big powers. We would love to connect with these countries so that they can assist ourselves in technological improvements, but also in providing a markets for what we can offer as produce of export, but also in the tourist sector. We love these people to assist ourselves, understand our needs, and assist ourselves to move forward. Regarding what model that the Pacific can utilize to access these developments, we think that in some cases, Tonga can go direct to the donors in terms of bilateral arrangements. But there are areas where Tonga and small Pacific countries can work together and approach on a multilateral model so that everybody is assisted and there's efficiency in the distributions and in the provision of assistances to our various countries. I think that's all from Tonga, and I hope I have shared a glimpse, an image of Tonga, which is pretty similar to other small archipelagos in our part of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Inoke, for your thoughts. It's very interesting. I think that we will have many questions for you after all the speakers. And the next one, I would like to introduce you Mr. Goryachev. He is the president of the Council on Pacific Affairs in Tahiti, and his theme is about impact of COVID pandemic to the world and to the Pacific and global industrial chains, the countermeasures. Please, Mr. Aquino, the stage is yours.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of computer problems here. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, very good. So I wanted to talk about the pandemic linked to the Pacific Ocean and the problems that we may bear regarding this. So if you wish, I would like to start with a small presentation, and I will start with Dame Meg Teller. She was the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum. And she was talking about the Pacific and the way we inspire to endurance and sustainability, and progress is difficult to sustain when we face multiple threats that reverse decades of development gains in a matter of days or hours. Do you see the files?
I'm sorry, we see your thesis.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have a computer problem. I'm really sorry about this.
Okay, could you send me your presentation?
maybe if you can let somebody else come by and I come back. Is this working now? I'm sorry.
Yes, it's working.
Okay. I'm really sorry about this. I've just changed my computer and everything is very new for me. So I wanted to start with Meg Teller. And she was talking about the Pacific as they aspire to endurance and sustainability. But as you know, Pacific has very limited resources, and the Pacific leaders were responding very quickly and established unprecedented measures to protect the health and livelihood of their people, including major stimulus packages. But in most of the Pacific Island countries, access to quality health services is limited due to a lack of infrastructure, equipment, and qualified personnel. In the current situation, this can pose a problem of access to care if the number of infected people increases. So most Pacific Island countries do not have the needed laboratory equipment to analyze the test on site, which creates difficulties in identifying cases. The test samples have to be sent to other countries for analysis. So the Pacific countries and territories are frequented by tourists. So this represents also a risk to the movement of people and of local communities. But in April 2020, the 18 leaders of the Pacific Island Forum recognized COVID-19 as a major crisis and invoked the Biketawa Declaration and the need to collectively respond to it as a Blue Pacific family. So the Pacific Island Forum foreign ministers agreed to establish the Pacific Humanitarian Pathway on COVID-19, PHPS, to collectively respond to the pandemic. The PHP is a high-level political mechanism ensuring regional coordination, expanding assistance and cooperation between Pacific countries in preparing for any response to COVID-19. So this includes facilitating the provision of timely and safe medical and humanitarian assistance from regional and international development partners, such as medical supplies donated by the CPFFC, to the Pacific Channel Friendship Association for Solomons, Vanuatu, Samoa, Tonga, Tahiti, New Caledonia, Wallis and Futuna, or the medical supplies donated, for example, by the Jack Ma Foundation, received in Fiji, French Polynesia, and Papua New Guinea. So the first big lesson from the COVID-19 pandemic is that the response requires a holistic and whole of government approach. The second lesson is a reminder on how our world is interconnected and transboundary impacts issues are unavoidable. So this should be an opportunity for our region and our partners at large to consider smart responses and strong recovery measures. Our economies have suffered but will recover. This is also an opportunity for nations to plan better, to include the most valuable in those plans and to shape the 21st century economies and societies in ways that are healthy, clean, safe, and resilient. So more preciously to the point of this discussion, this had a very big impact on all the walks of life. As you know, to outline the pandemic on the blue economy, health, marine environment, and ocean security, for the means of a discussion, the blue economy here includes both those who work at sea and those who livelihood depend on it. As a quick reminder, 90% of the world's cargo moves by sea. Fish, as our colleague from Tonga just said, is the most widely traded food commodity, providing essential protein for about 1 billion people, and many of the world's 4.5 million fishing vessels remain at sea for weeks or months at a time. So the promiscuity leaves the sailors vulnerable to shipboard COVID-19 outbreaks. So the impacts have been huge on ocean security and also on sustainability. So even during the most serene of times, ocean remains a wild, poorly policed frontier. The COVID-19 pandemic intensified the gap of offshore law enforcement as Coast Guards looked inward to manage the domestic crisis rather than patrol the sea. So the sustainable management relies on accurate, timely data more than ever. And the COVID-19 here again has made good data harder to attain. So research cruises have been canceled. So this lack of up-to-date ocean data will be especially problematic for the poor regions. So the pandemic had also impacts on fisheries. Fish, as we said, is the most widely traded food commodity. But since the pandemic, market disruptions have emerged. Consumers have dramatically increased demand for frozen and processed seafood while turning away from fresh caught products. This may be a result of both a preference on foods that may be kept through periods of isolation, and most consumers eat fish fresh in restaurants that today don't longer open. So in small scale or near shore industrial or artisanal fisheries, vessels return to shore each day. So they rely on small shoreside networks, local markets, commercial buyers, processors, families or communities who rely on the catch of the day for food security. So poorly served by health infrastructure, social distancing is impossible and outbreaks are highly disruptive. So large industrial scale fishing coming in the Pacific or at sea for months to years, as we have seen. Catches are transshipped at sea. Any actual outbreak at sea is catastrophic. So distant water fishing vessels that fish offshore for weeks or months are especially common in the Pacific. I think of Majuro, the Marshall Islands, Suva, Fiji, Papeete, Tahiti, Tonga also. So they rely on foreign ports for offloading catch. Vessels leave the port with fishes, possibly incubating COVID-19, and then they spend weeks or months at sea in overcrowded conditions. So short side visits are frequent, but in fact, are difficult to quarantine. So fisheries are really a risk at now. And tourism, so behind the fishing industry, Pacific Airlines and ocean tourism have suffered as travel just totally stopped. So coral reef tourism generates about $36 billion a year, a value that has been key in drivers of marine conservation. So lost revenues will increase pressure for short-term exploitations of the resources. All the small Pacific Island states where ocean tourism accounts for at least 1/4 of the GDP or especially vulnerable. So to sum up, for Pacific Island countries, this period should be leveraged as an opportunity time to phase risk-informed and risk-considered development planning. This also will enable our systems and facilities to withstand the unforeseen pressure from pandemic and build the resilience of communities and critical public infrastructure. Thank you very much. And sorry for the problem in the beginning.
Thank you for your very important presentation and very important thoughts about the Pacific states during the pandemic. And the next one is will be Dr. Elena Goriacheva, a research fellow of Institute of History, Archaeology, and Ethnology of Forestry Branch of Russian Academy of Sciences. And her topic is growing interest to the Pacific, new shifts of Japan's foreign policy. Elena, please, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone, distinguished colleagues and organizers of this conference. I'm very grateful to all of you to have opportunity to speak here. So I represent a territory and institution which may seem to be quite far from the Pacific small island states, but our region here, far east of Russia and Vladivostok, is often called Pacific Russia. So we are part of the Pacific, though a very distant one. And I would like to share some of my thoughts on new shifts of Japan's foreign policy. And I would like to share my presentation here. Just a moment, I will try to open it. And then make my remarks on it. Just a moment. Okay, can you see my screen? If not, please inform me about it. Is it okay?
Yes, it is okay. We can see it.
So I will proceed. First, some kind of historical background of Japan's foreign policy here in the Asia Pacific, because it has had, it was a very long view here. And principles of Japan's foreign policy in the Asia Pacific have changed over the time. So for the post-war diplomacy after the end of the Second World War, Japan has elaborated several principles of post-war organization, of post-war diplomacy. They were cooperation with liberal countries and maintaining Japan's position as a strong actor in Asia. And then after the end of the Cold War, in the end of the 20th century, it was emphasizing Asia-Pacific dimension by achieving two goals, that is emphasis on Asia and strengthening US-Japan relations. And the Asia-Pacific was Japan's attempt to involve the United States in Asia, but now we have new Indo-Pacific dimension that have resulted in diluting Asian elements from Japan's diplomatic stance. We can see that influence of the United States is overwhelmingly strong on this change of Japan's diplomatic attitude, but of course it's influenced not only by United States. One more important factor is relations of Japan with neighboring countries, and the reason why these relations have deteriorated so significantly. And the cause of this deterioration of relations is the change of the balance of real national powers surrounding Japan, for example, China and South Korea, and their national sentiment. You know that the China's GDP had changed significantly, and now it's nearly 3 times as large as Japan, and Korean also have changed. So those were powers that couldn't be underestimated. And it's easy to imagine that under today's conditions, Japan-China relations will become even more severe in the region because lately, as you know, Japan-US joint statement was taken and signed on the 16th of April this year, and it clarifying the stance of Japan and the United States working together to oppose China. So now another area has appeared where interests of growing China and Japan can clash. That is the region of Pacific small island states. And there are several milestones, as I think, that can mark significant changes in Japan's foreign policy toward Pacific small states. And one of them, now I'm sharing the slide, which was made by Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. That is, as you know, well-known free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. And though some pillars of this region are listed to realize this initiative, this strategy, and you can see them on the screen, I can see that, I can assume that Japan's broad core objectives they foster inclusiveness in part to balance against China's rising power in the region as it is. And these priorities include several aspects or factors. They are enhancing strategic cooperation with countries that share Japan's security interests, and commitment to universal values. And one of the major things Japan see here is US-Japan alliance as a cornerstone. Then the second one is promoting fundamental principles such as freedom of navigation and rule of law, especially maritime law. Then advancing prosperity by enhancing connectivity, including infrastructure development, that is port infrastructure, and demonstrating a commitment to peace and stability in areas such as capacity building for maritime law enforcement and disaster risk reduction. And you know that island states, and Japan is also an island states, they suffer from tsunamis and other things. And here on the slide, we can see that the Pacific Ocean is a really great part of the Free and Open Pacific Initiative territory. Although the second slide, which was also created by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, it shows main projects maybe they are concentrated in Africa or India or Southeast Asia, but still some of them are in the Pacific. And I would like to quote former Prime Minister Abe, which long before publishing this initiative, he used the World Democratic Security Diamond of Asia, talking about this region. He stated that Japan's priority was to expand the country's strategic horizons, and that he, as a prime minister, envisaged a strategy whereby Australia, India, Japan, and the US, state of Hawaii, form a diamond to safeguard the maritime commons, stretching from the Indian Ocean region to the Western Pacific. So he also managed this area. Thus, we can see these changes in the Japan's policy. I will skip for now talking about programs of economic help and economic cooperation of Japan with the Pacific Island states, because everybody knows that Japan and China and Australia are greatest donors to this region. I will mention only soft power programs that Japan successfully realizes at Pacific small states. Among programs of cultural exchange, there is program Genesis that is aimed at deeper understanding of Japan for the youth of these small states, people who are interested in Japanese politics, economics, and culture, so that can form a group of highly educated local young people loyal to Japan. And several thousands of people participate in this program every year. About 2,400 people every year, and even more participated there, about 4,000 in 2017 and 19. And one more important point I would like to point out there, referring to the historical memory. Another change of Japanese diplomacy in the Pacific is referring here to the historical memory. That is, Japan accusing China, so that China is trying to build so-called Great Asia Community, just like Japan do during the Second World War. In the left part of the slide, you can see that very old concept of Japan's Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, and Pacific Islands were also included here. So Japan now saying that China tries to do the same. And especially in Japanese mass media, there is public discussion. It's held that China tries to expand its territorial influence from the East and South China Sea to the Pacific small states. And they mean by this, they mean both military and economic expansion. And also they admit that Chinese experts have studied and analyzed Japanese strategy of expanding in the region, particularly in terms of communication with peoples of Pacific small states, so that not to make mistakes that Japan made before. And they have made their conclusion. And on the right side of the screen, you can see another concept made by Japanese experts. That is how they see the system of security of China based on island chain security basis. They talk a lot about that China has included Pacific small states in the third island chain, so that to expand there. I should say that in conclusion, I should say that Japan seems to take the strategy, seems to develop the strategy like it did with the very remote areas of Russia, for example, Far East and Siberia, because as Japan showed no interest to the states before China came there, and after Chinese investors came in these remote regions, Japan also started to show more interest in them. And I think that as to the Pacific, of course, the situation is a little bit different because Japan was here for a long time. But as the two great powers are both present in the region, I think that their competition, rivalry in the best sense of the word will benefit the region. And I hope that it will not end in some kind of confrontation, wherever it can be military one or economic one. And just one last thing, as for military conflict, as for the public discourse of mass media, Japan doesn't see itself as a part of this conflict. It is as a conflict. It seemed like a conflict of US and China in the region here, and Japan sees itself as a rival to the China as economic partner. So I think that now we're entering very interesting era where previously neglected areas or areas which were not playing a great part in the region, they have started to play a more important role and have become interesting places of interest for very great powers, and Pacific small states are one of these territories. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your beautiful presentation. And the last one, it is my presentation, is about the role and place of the Oceanian subregions in contemporary international relations between powers and resources. So, can you see my slides or not?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Yes, we can.
Okay. And as you know, the Pacific has 3 subregions, and each of these regions has a unique place in Oceania during their historical heritage and the conditions of modern states formation. And so, as you can see in the map, you can see 4 subregions: is Australasia, Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia. Each of these regions has a unique history, but during the World War II, only Micronesia and Melanesia has very big importance for the Allies during the war with Japan. So the Melanesia now includes 4 independent countries, and also includes special parts like Maluku Islands and Western New Guinea, which is the Indonesian part of the island of New Guinea. The Micronesia has United States Commonwealth territories of the Northern Mariana Island, Guam, and Wake Island, which are US territories. And Micronesia is now the region where the United States presence is probably the most significant. In the Polynesia, this region is the richest in the terms of political structures. First of all, there are independent states, there are overseas and external territories and countries also located here. And third, there are also regions that are part of the other states, United States, Hawaii, and Chile, the eastern island. And for from the geopolitical point of view, the Polynesia is more difficult than other regions because what is it? What is that? I'm sorry about that. I don't know what is it. But regardless the geographic location, all the states of Oceania during the Second World War were an important springboard for the Allies in the fight against Japan. And during the confrontation between USSR and the United States in the Cold War, this region also was very important. And Polynesia caused a significant damage during nuclear tests on its territory. To some extent, it can be said that the region suffered in the Cold War also did not participate in it. And now, concept of Indo-Pacific and Oceania has really what is? I'm sorry. I should. I don't know what is it. I should stop my demonstration. What is it? I'm sorry about that, and I will. It's better. So I will try to start my demonstration one more. And in the Pacific and the Oceania is in the Pacific concept in various interpretations of the various actors you can see on this slide. So what is okay, we will do this without our without my presentation. Oh, it can be stupid.
Please say it again. Just give me 2 minutes. हेर त है नामहरु हेर को चलिरहेको देखाउँछ नि खास डिसेबल भन्नु मिल्छ नि एनोटेट भनेको सायद आयो क्लियर गर्न मिल्छ क्लियर
Can you see it?
Just a second, let me disable annotate.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. And the challenges. The change in the world order, which primarily influenced by the political growth of China, presents the regions of Oceania with a new challenge because it has also become the arena of geopolitical struggle, along with the struggle of their natural resources. And the states of Oceania, with the exception of Australia and New Zealand, remain largely geologically underexplored, and in some cases do not have enough funds to develop the extractive industry. Hence, they are forced to rely on foreign investment. In the future, the struggle for resources can become the main catalysts for both economic development and environmental, including other problems in the region. In this case, the leading role in determining the real position of small states and territories in Oceania in the modern world should belong to the regional organizations, the very existence of which is precisely due to the question of the need for political unity. And this organization will be the Pacific Islands Forum and become a platform for consolidating political course, despite the fact that in February of 2021, the states of Micronesia announced their withdrawal from it. In this case, the whole question is, what is primary is the desire of the leaders to earn political points through populism, or whether they pursue a real goal for development. This political organization has all the prerequisites in order not only to unite countries politically, but also to work out a common strategy for the development of the region in order to avoid resource and debt traps, because the resources is very important for the Oceania, because New Caledonia has large nickel reserves. And so I apologize to you for this difficulty with my presentation, because it was really unexpected for me. And so I think that we should go to the question and answer sections. And the first question is question to Mr. Inoke. You have mentioned China as a major player in the region, making a great contribution for the region in the terms of economic cooperation. What do you think about the future of the region? Will China remain the major contributor here, or another country such as Japan can compete with China in the economic field? Please unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. The response to the questions, I think it will depend very much on how these countries view what they can get out from Pacific states. We talk about the Japanese policy, we talk about other policies, and of course, priorities for them, what would be the benefit to them with regards to that, to their relationship development with countries like Tonga or small Pacific islands. As of now, of course, the Chinese are developing the Leather Belt initiative. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, the Silk Belt initiative, and that's of course involve a growing and expanding the economy. And I think other policies then hangs on those kind of national development and national interests. And therefore, I think in the next future, say 5 years, they will continue to expand the Silk Belt development, and therefore will continue to assist with Pacific Islands or other countries where they want to take their products, to take their country in terms of their resource requirements. So my thinking is it will continue.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. And the next question is question to Mr. Goriacheva. The question is, you have mentioned that limited resources of Pacific states is really important. Do you think that in the long-term perspective, there could be conflicts of great power states in the Pacific region for the local fishing and other resources that Pacific states possess?
Thank you very much for your questions, Nikolay. I believe our friend Inoke Vala would be much more, would have a much better answer than I will, based on his experience, in his work experience. But we have different type of resources, as you have said. You were talking about fishery resources. That's one of the discussions we had. You talked about nickel in New Caledonia.
I'm under the water.
Please, I know that
you're too much reading.
I know that our friend in New Caledonia had a computer problems, was not able to log on, and we have rare earth also. And I believe that we are having another resources, which is going to be, I think, very prominent in the near future. It's aquaculture, because in the South China Seas, we have a lot of hurricanes. And when you do aquaculture, all the food, all the money, all the resources are in the ocean. So you need to be in places where the ocean is calm. And the middle of the Pacific is the best place for this, as we have very little impact on cyclones and typhoons. So I believe tomorrow, our lagoons, our ocean are going to be no more fishing areas, more aquaculture areas. And I believe it's a much more sustainable also economy for us. And I look forward that we can work on this. But as you know, the president, Emmanuel Macron, just came to Tahiti, and we had a very big aquaculture project, a Chinese project of about $1.5 billion. And Emmanuel Macron just asked us to stop it because it was Chinese investments. So you were talking about countries which are independent, semi-independent, autonomous, etc. But we are more and more feeling the heat of what Elena was just talking about, you know, those Indo-Pacific, Japanese, Australian, New Zealand pressure. And we feel that we are going to have less and less the choice, and we are going to fall back into the Western world and in the Pacific world. So that is taking our choices away. I hope I have responded slightly to your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer. And the third question is question for me. How I see the pessimistic and optimistic scenarios for the Pacific small island states upon the circumstances and the factors that I have described in my presentation. So I think the pessimistic scenario is more complicated than optimistic, because optimistic scenario is, it will be something like if the Pacific Island Forum would become a really big organization with specific rights and specific aims to promote the cooperation between independent Pacific Island states. it will be a major player in geopolitical sphere here in the region. But unfortunately, we still have some issues from colonization process, and decolonization process didn't finish yet. And if all the states of the Oceania have their independence in the future, it will be optimistic scenario for all of the states, because they can make some unity and pursue their own aims and their own strategies. But the pessimistic scenario is linked with United States naval bases in the region, because when United States withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think their military presence in the region may be increased, because the region of Micronesia, I think the Guam and the Mariana Islands is very important for United States within their rivalry with China and military rivalry. And if United States could make a pressure for independent countries, they will pursue their strategy to weak the China. And if the small countries has no political will to stop it, it will be a pessimistic scenario for the region. That's all. And so maybe more questions are. Question from Mr. Inoke. You are welcome.
Yes, I had another question for Elena. As we talk a lot about the Indo-Pacific region, I would like to know her input of the role of Japan, because I believe the first time the term was coined, it was by Japanese, by Abe, but it wasn't used, and now it's used again. So what is the role of Japan in the Indo-Pacific overall game? And also, we've heard lots of commentators saying that since America is leaving Afghanistan, it can now concentrate on the Indo-Pacific. So my question is the Indo-Pacific only a war zone for the Indo-Pacific axis? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting questions. I can talk a lot about this, but you know, the situation is changing so rapidly and drastically now, and even the Japanese foreign policy, which has been rigid for very many decades, is changing now. For example, I have talked about the US-Japan alliance, which has very broad sense, and of course it's also includes Indo-Pacific area as the area of cooperation. So Japan is now trying to play not only a role of economic donor to some regions. In the US-Japan alliance, it started to play more active role and asks for many, privileges for itself, not just to be a silent member of this union. So there is some kind of prejudice, like Japanese enterprises and politics think that the only interest of the neighboring states and small states in Japan is receiving some kind of aid and financial help. But even the small states and even the countries that are under development, and Russia was one of them, they started to grow now and started to get more and more power, even in their regions and abroad. And I think that if we see on this historical path as a very long one, during the Second World War, of course, Japan was one of the major states there. Then it was one of the major states in terms of economic aid to the region. And now it has lost lots of its positions to the China, I think. And now it's trying to maybe to fulfill the gap, but the question is, does the Japan possess necessary resources for that? And what are the feelings and sentiments of local people? Because there are still very bad, I think, history memories about the Japanese presence in the region. And as for China, there are not such memories, and there are so many contribution and aid. So I think that Japan is in the very harsh condition, expanding to the Pacific Island states. So very many difficulties it will face. And for Afghanistan, if I'm right in understanding your question, for Japan, there is a concept or thinking like, so many neighboring states surrounding Japan that are that have a very bad impression, a very negative impression of that. For example, China and South Korea and very many other countries. So Japan has to defend itself. And every shift in the relations of allies here, every shift is viewed like the weakening of Japan. But as for Afghanistan, Afghanistan wasn't an ally to the United States. It was just a base for the troops. So the rigid Japanese foreign policy doesn't seem it as a weakening of US or like some kind of betraying. It's just, of course, it's negative, but Central Asia and this Middle East issues, they are, for now, they are far from Japan's area of interest. The Middle East interests Japan in its connection with China and the growing China importance for Central Asia, former USSR countries, and so on. So it's just, one event on the world politic stage. I would I would express it like that. Of course, it's only my opinion here.
Thank you so much for your answer. And if we no more questions, I think we should go and finish our. I'm very grateful for all of you to join us today. I apologize for this some of these problems during the session. I think that one time the pandemic will stop and we will meet in our, not in virtually. And so thank you for all participants. Thank you for the audience for attend our session. And thank you so much.
Distinguished Chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of this session, we would like to express a sincere gratitude and thanks to the Chair for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. Our sincere thanks also goes to all the speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such comprehensive and convincing presentations. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, we must also mention our deep sense of appreciation for the audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making this session productive with your questions. Once again, we are truly honored to have you all with us today. Please do join us in the next session. Thank you so much.